Today, we're going to be having our first partner spotlight, and it's going to be today with Serena from Schertz-Cibolo-Universal City ISD. Just to give you a little background on the partner spotlight, it's going to be our first attempt to share some of the great work that school districts that we are working with are doing across the entire country and how KickUp's supporting that effort. And it's going to be similar to events we've done in the past, but a little bit shorter and focused on how our product's helping a school district meet their goals. So really excited to get into that a little bit further today, but we'll start off first with a little bit of background on what we're going to be doing today. Today, we're going to be diving in and exploring how SCUC bridged the gap between their coaching work that they were doing and the professional learning work that they're doing. And then before the end of today's session, we're going to be highlighting some of the strategies they're using for next year to track their mentorship data using coaching cycles in KickUp. So for a quick agenda of what we're going to be doing today, we'll start off with some introductions. We'll learn a little bit more of SCUC's background. We'll get into their story and some of the problems that they were facing when we met about a year ago. We'll finish off with a Q&A, and then we'll share some next steps. So just to quickly introduce myself, my name's Kendra. I'm a senior client success manager. I came from the classroom. I'm a former third grade teacher, former kindergarten teacher. And today I'm really excited that I'm going to be joined by someone who I've worked with for the past year, who is such an amazing critical thinker and is just doing some really exciting work in education. So Serena, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself as well.
Sure. Thank you, Kendra. I'm Serena Georges, and I'm the Director of Curriculum and Professional Development for Schertz-Cibolo-Universal City ISD. And like Kendra, I'm a former classroom teacher. I've taught pre-K, first grade, third, fifth, and then I was also an assistant principal and a principal at one time as well.
Awesome. And then if anyone else hasn't already, feel free to share in the chat your name, school district, role, and any goals that you have today for learning. I think a couple people have shared already. Thank you so much for joining in. And I also want to share just a little bit about Schertz-Cibolo. So I'm going to pass things over to Serena. If you could just kind of briefly describe your district overall.
So in our district, we serve 17 campuses, which includes 8 elementary campuses, and our elementary campuses are actually pre-K through 4th grade campuses. We also have intermediate schools. There's 3 of them, and those are our 5th and 6th grade campuses. And then junior high, of course, is 7th and 8th, and then high school is 9th through 12th. We serve a little more than 15,000 students, and then we have about 1,000 teachers that we also employ in our district. We're in the San Antonio area, so if you're familiar with the San Antonio area, we're on the northeast side of San Antonio, just right outside of 1604. And we actually serve 6 cities in the area. We serve the northeast San Antonio area, of course, and Schertz-Cibolo-Universal City, Selma, Converse, and then a small little town called St. Hedwig. We're also very military connected. We're located right outside of Randolph Air Force Base, and so we have a high military population as well.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that context. And you'll kind of see from these numbers, they're supporting a lot of teachers from a lot of different areas. And so you'll see some of the creative ways they're using to track all of the different people that they're supporting. So to give you a little bit of a background on their story, when I met Serena about a year ago, she shared with me about 3 problems that they were facing and hoping to solve by working with us at KickUp. So she first shared that they were using some clunky systems. They had siloed data that was sort of living in a bunch of different places. And then ultimately, because the data was so siloed, when they were trying to look at it, they had a lot of difficulty connecting all of those pieces together. She also shared that they had campus level PD that was happening, district level PD that was happening and not a good sense of what PD was actually effective, and no way to sort of communicate to stakeholders which of these pieces of PD would actually be good to continue to implement. And then finally, she shared that she wanted to have a culture of growth and building these skills in facilitators and coaches so that they could turn around and improve their processes over time. So instead of me sort of explaining her story, I want to push things over to Serena to share a little bit more about this first issue of Clunky system. So Serena, I'd love to hear more about how you were collecting data prior to working with KickUp.
Okay, good question. So prior to KickUp, we did have a professional learning management system. And like you said, it was a bit clunky. It was very limited in the information that was able to provide to us and what we could pull out from the campus level and the district level. And so because the system was so cumbersome to just even pull information out of, what we ended up doing was utilizing a Google form where teachers would fill out what their perception of the professional learning was like for them and what the likelihood of implementation was going to be for them. And as you know, with Google Forms, it's, you get some information from Google Forms, but to be able to drill down the data in a way that you can actually see what the effect is going to be was very difficult as well. And then the Google Forms itself was at the district level, so we couldn't see what was happening at the campus level as far as professional learning. And then for us too, we also have mentors who support our teachers, and our mentors were actually required to provide our teachers with professional learning throughout the school year, our new teachers. And so they're required to meet with their new teachers for about 12 hours in the first semester and 12 hours during the second semester. And what they were having to do was just hand calculate and hand document that time and then send that information over to me. And then I would verify that information and then pay them out their mentor stipend. With that type of system, it's hard to determine what the needs of the new teacher were. As you're trying to process this paperwork, it's hard to really drill down in that paperwork what the needs of new teachers were and then how we were fulfilling those specific needs. And so the systems itself that we were utilizing were not 20th century systems. They were pretty outdated systems. And so we needed something that was going to actually help us to compile the data that we needed so that we can be a little bit more proactive.
Yeah. And I remember when I met you, you were sort of talking about all the time that you were spending in all of these different systems and then not getting a ton of the outcomes you were looking for.
Exactly.
So to give you a sense of where they went from there, they went from having those clunky systems, and then they started utilizing two of the modules that we offer, Foundations and Learning. Within Foundations, Serena described how they were trying to do these mentor logs, and we'll show you a little bit more of that data in a moment. They started using the coaching logs also within Foundations, and then they started utilizing the learning platform as well. Serena, anything you would add as far as what this transition looked like for you all to some of these new systems?
Oh, goodness. So, whenever you're implementing a new system at the start of a school year in a pandemic, during a pandemic, right, anything can set people over the edge, right? And so when we implemented KickUp, we worked with Kendra on creating videos for our teachers and for our staff so they knew exactly how to log into KickUp, what KickUp was, why we were moving from our old professional learning management system to the new one. And what we found was it's probably was the easiest transition we've ever made to a system. The way you log in is extremely simple. The way teachers can pull up sessions is very easy. It's user-friendly. The way they get credit for their courses and their sessions is extremely user-friendly. Now our teachers know that they need to get their little attendance code and they can enter that attendance code and get credit immediately. And prior to that, we were actually having to have sign-in sheets, and then the facilitator was going back into the professional learning system and then giving credit to every single teacher. And so it just has simplified it in a way that it saves time, and it's just was so easy to implement. And so I thank Kendra and her team for helping us with that piece, but the system itself is so easy. very little hiccups in implementation.
Awesome. Always glad to hear that. So in addition to just kind of switching over to the system, I know one huge piece for you was making sure that you weren't just switching over to a new system to switch over to a new system. You wanted to sort of walk away with data that would actually help you answer programmatic questions. So I'd love to hear from your perspective. Could you share more about how you shifted your process of PD data collection in the past year?
Yeah, so KickUp, it was a game changer for us as far as the type of data that we've been able to collect, especially just in 1 year. It's amazing. First, I wanted to start with our mentor logs. You know, our mentor logs were something that was hand done by our mentors prior to implementing KickUp. And now we're able to see with one report the number of hours our mentors have supported our teachers. And so at one little click, I can see such and such mentor has met with their teacher this many hours. And that helps me to just monitor along the school year, during the school year. Helps me to monitor the time that our mentors are providing to our new teachers. And if a mentor is doing a great job, I can send them a shout out and say, hey, you have this many hours, great job. Or sometimes they need a little nudging because they're busy and they haven't had the time. And so I just send them a little email and say, hey, you're at this many hours. Don't forget to be meeting with your new teacher. So it helps me to be able to monitor their time. And I wasn't able to do that before. I didn't know until the end of the year whether or not they had even met with their new teachers. Our mentor logs are also aligned to our learning framework. We have a learning framework within our district, and it has 4 key areas. And so the areas are aligned curriculum and assessment. We have relevant and flexible pedagogy, learner-centered environment, and then safe and caring environment. And so the logs are actually aligned to those areas. And because they're aligned to those key areas, I can tell at the drop of a dime exactly where our mentors are spending the most of their time with our new teachers. And because I can tell right away as we're planning professional learning during the school year and even for the start of the school year, I know exactly where we need to focus our efforts in which one of those key areas we need to focus our efforts. I can also tell as far as the time that they're going in and they're observing their new teachers, what are they observing their new teachers for? Is it classroom management that the new teacher is needing, or do they need help with their learning targets or activities that they're providing to their students? And so because I'm able to tell that information, I can sit down with our coordinators and really hash out what we're going to be teaching our new teachers during the school year so that we're making sure we're meeting those needs alongside with our mentors. Now that we have a full year of mentor logs too, I'm able to plan out next school year. So this school year, we were kind of planning along the way as we were getting that data. But now that I have a full year's worth of data, I can sit down with the coordinators and actually plan out our support for new teachers for all of next school year. And then as I meet with mentors for this school year, I can actually sit down and show them, okay, these are some of the areas our teachers this year said that they struggled with. And so we may want to keep that in mind as we're sitting down with our new teachers this school year, and just be proactive in how we're meeting their needs. And then the other piece too is we also have, as part of KickUp, our instructional coaches. We do have instructional coaches at some of our campuses, and they have logs as well in KickUp. And so we can see where our instructional coaches are also spending their time with teachers. And then when we bring our instructional coaches together, whatever's bubbling up as trends that we have identified in the data, we're able to have a PLC with our coaches and talk through how they're handling some of those pieces. And then this way they can learn from each other as well. And then as far as the professional learning, I can see now what level of effectiveness our professional learning has had for our teachers. Before I could not see that. So now I can tell, 90% or more of our professional learning is meeting our teacher needs. And then I can also see, well, where are we falling short? And so when I see that we're falling short in some areas, we have in our district what we call strategic abandonment. And so we talk about whether or not we need to strategically abandon some of the things that we're requiring teachers to do as far as professional learning if it's not being as effective as we need it to be.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. I always think of you as like such a great model of using data to be really actionable and make sure that any supports that we're providing to teachers, that we're thinking about those supports and how to improve them over time. I'd love to share a little bit of the data that Serena has collected over this past year. So I'm going to jump out of here and jump into a quick demo to share some of the pieces that she just mentioned with you. So in their first year, they collected over 1,000 pieces of PD feedback data since they launched. They have great data that's really, really important to celebrate, but I wanted to specifically highlight some of the pieces that I know Serena's used the most. One piece is looking at this learning experience and seeing if it differed across the school building, seeing if the same supports were being provided. When I first met Serena, she shared that she was concerned with some of the district level PDs, that she sort of knew what was happening, but the building level PDs, she wasn't sure if each building was receiving the same support. And by having sort of access to what was the learner experience here and being able to look at it school by school, she's able to look at this scale and see from strongly disagree to agree how her participants are overall rating this PD. The other piece I really wanted to share that I know I'd love to hear a little from Serena about how she's really utilized it. But I know one piece that's been especially helpful for their team is this data on the follow-up support. So Serena, could you describe a little bit about how you're using this feature and then maybe along with this application of learning question?
Yeah, so the application of learning question, I'm going to tell you, is essential because we want to be able to see that teachers are actually taking what they're learning and they're implementing it into the classroom. When we see a high application of learning, we have our coordinators who go out into PLCs and they use this information to help drive some of that conversation that our teachers are having in their PLCs. So for example, when we did training on learning targets, we wanted to see that there was a high application of learning there, and wherever we saw that it fell short, we knew we had to drill that back in as we were having conversations in PLCs with teachers and as we were planning. Sometimes it's just a follow-up because there was a misconception or misunderstanding during training, and so it just helps us to understand, okay, where was the breakdown? And then as far as the follow-up support and needs, that's also another key component that we utilize when we're supporting our teachers. So when we say like no additional support is needed, we do say yay, but we do, do some checks and balances just to make sure, are they really able to implement what they actually have just learned? And a lot of that also comes through our PLC support as well. So if we're providing professional learning at the district level, and now we're expecting to see implementation, then we should hear conversations around it in our PLCs. Opportunities to collaborate with peers, that's typically one that always stands out for us. And so what we're doing, this is helping us in planning our professional learning for next school year. So typically when we have our professional learning, our teachers come and they sit in sessions, they learn what they need to learn, then they take it back into the classroom. And so what we're finding is that they want opportunities to collaborate with like peers across the district. And so next school year, what we did is we adjusted our school calendar so that we included early release days that will give them that opportunity so that all of our first grade teachers across the district can get together and discuss what they've learned and how they've implemented it. And get assistance if needed from our coordinators. And the same thing on those early release days for even our librarians getting together. So we use this information to also help us make some decisions on how we're providing professional learning next school year. And it helped us in even making some of those calendar decisions and how now we can help our teachers to have those opportunities for collaborative conversations with their peers.
Very cool. Exciting to hear about the way that you're using PLCs to really address people's individual needs. I'd love to share a little bit more of your data in just a moment, but would love to hear a little bit more. you spoke to this culture of growth, and it's so clear in hearing how you're reflecting on your PD data about the way that you're thinking about a culture of growth for professional learning. I'm really curious to hear how the culture of your mentorship and coaching programs changed as a result of the data that you were able to collect with KickUp.
Yeah, I gotcha. So our mentorship program prior to KickUp, like I said, it was hard to monitor that, how our teachers were being supported through mentorship. Our mentors now, so some of our mentors, I should rewind, some of our mentors that we currently have were mentors with our old system as well.
Mhm.
And so with the new system, what we've gotten is, oh my goodness, this is so much easier than what we had to do before. And so it's helping them to stay on track with what type of professional development or what type of support they're providing to their new teachers. The KickUp information itself, it helps us with our new teachers, but it also helps with our mentors as well. Because from the information, we're able to see where we need to support our mentors in their learning so that they can better support new teachers. And so, like I said earlier, it's going to help me and our team to plan out how we're going to support new teachers for the school year, for next school year, but it's also going to help us to know how we're going to train our mentors for next school year as well. And so what we found with this data is that we have to change how we're training our mentors. Because from the data itself, the mentors have stated, my new teacher needs help in this, but I don't know that I have a firm enough understanding in this information to be able to support them the way they needed to be supported. And so it's helping us this information to identify where we need to continue to coach our mentors, and then where we need to continue to coach our new teacher liaisons too, because every campus also has a new teacher liaison that also assists our mentors and our new teachers. So for this information itself, it's helping our mentors also to be reflective about their practice and how they're approaching the work that they do with new teachers.
Very cool. And do you see that same pattern of reflection in your coaches as well?
In our instructional coaches, yes. And so with KickUp, this has been the first year that we've been able to bring our instructional coaches together and actually talk about some of the things that they're seeing with tangible data. So when they started entering the information in KickUp, some trends start to bubble up as far as what teachers need and how they're going in and into classrooms and what they're assisting teachers with. And so this is the first year we've been able to say, okay, look at what the data is showing us. And now how are we addressing the specific need that teachers may have or, campuses may have. So this is the first year we've been able to have an actual data-driven conversation as far as coaching in our district, because we have the data we need to be able to say, okay, these are the things we need to be able to talk about with our teachers.
Awesome. I mean, huge kudos to you for facilitating those conversations and really making the most of your data. I'd love to walk through just a tiny piece. Tarina and I, before this call, were talking about how they've collected so much data that it's almost hard to decide which pieces to show today. But I wanted to show you just one piece, which is their mentorship log data. So they have over 1,000 mentor logs that were submitted. And these are logs that are just submitted as mentorship's happening. And it's how Serena can kind of get this full picture of everything that's happening in the program. So she can quickly at a glance view hours by content area. She can click in to see where those supports are happening and who those supports are happening from and to whom. She can look at which activities are occurring the most when her mentors are working with her new teachers, look at the areas of support and see if there's any alignment with district priorities. And then she can even look at the coaching effectiveness. And these are self-assessment ratings, but can be a really helpful way that she can dig into where mentors feel most confident. So I'm curious to hear from you, which of these pieces do you find you're using the most, your mentors are using the most when you're digging into these data conversations?
So the piece that I actually use the most is the top piece that you showed us with the different, the hours by content and hours by activity and areas of support. Specifically, when I'm checking hours, I'm looking here. But when I'm really wanting to drill down as far as what teachers are asking for, the hours by areas of support is what helps me to know where are our mentors spending the most time. And so I can actually click on those, the little graph there, and see exactly who they're spending the time with, which mentors are actually spending their time there, I should say. And then I can also see, I also know from the report itself, where exactly are they having to spend the most amount of time with their new teachers. So for example, we saw in the beginning of the year that they were spending, and this changes actually, you'll see over time, it'll change from, month to month. So it's important to keep an eye on it too, just to see, are there changes in the data? But what we saw in the beginning of the year is very different than what we saw by the time we got to the end of the year. So in the beginning of the year, what we saw at the top was actually parent communication and conferences. That was more towards the top. And so when we saw that bubbling up as a trend at the top, when our first year teachers came in for training, we made sure we had a session about parent communication because we saw that that was an area where mentors were spending the most amount of time. Another area that had bubbled to the top in the beginning of the year was classroom management. They were spending quite a bit of time with classroom management. So we made sure when we brought new teachers in for their formal district training, we had a session on classroom management so that we can address the needs that we were seeing in the data. And so, like I said, it changes over time. By the time we got to the end of the school year, it was more things about the curriculum and the planning, like you see here. And so by the end of the school year, we were building in opportunities for learning around that information. So this really helped us in driving what we were planning for new teachers. And so, like I said, this was our first year. And so we were kind of planning as we go, but now we have all of this data, right? And so for next year, as we sit down and plan what we're doing with new teachers, I have this data to go back to and say, okay, this is what we need to make sure, this is the areas we need to make sure we're hitting as we're planning some time with our new teachers. It also helps us too when we're planning our in-service in the beginning of the year in August, when we're welcoming all of our teachers to SCUC. Where do we need to now make sure we spend some time? So district and campus policy and procedures, that bubbled up to the top as an area of need. So that tells me during their in-service time in August, we need to make sure we're spending some time there so that they're familiar with what our district and campus policy and procedures are.
I really appreciate how immediately reactive you are and how you're sort of taking everything you're learning from both coaching and mentorship to do this immediately planning around professional learning. And it's interesting to see how you use those two pieces in tandem. So I know you've alluded a little bit to some of the work you're going to be doing next year, but I just wanted to introduce some of the planning that we've already done around next year. Give everyone else a sense of how they handle mentorship, because they're doing some really exciting things program-wide, and then dig into the tool that we'll be using for next year for tracking these mentorship pieces. So if you could talk a little bit about some of these components of your mentorship program and how your mentors are supporting your new teachers.
Yes, so for our mentorship program, we do provide teachers who have 2 years or less experience with a mentor. And so typically we try to make sure that mentor is, the same grade level or the same content area. Every now and then you'll get a singleton. And so when that happens, we'll work on getting a mentor who might be at another campus, but they have time to be able to meet together. I think about like our CTE teachers and our art teachers who sometimes are singletons on their campuses. And so when they're assigned a mentor, we actually meet with our mentors to actually go through this cycle so that they're very familiar what the cycle needs to look like when they're meeting with their teachers. But in essence, there's a collaboration meeting that happens with teachers. The collaboration meetings are actually meetings that are based off what the new teacher needs. So in the beginning of the school year, the new teacher fills out an individual mentoring plan. And just think of like an IEP for special education students. It's their plan and what they feel like they need the most help in. And so the collaboration meetings are actually driven by that plan. And so if the new teacher feels like they need assistance in classroom management, the collaboration meetings will be around classroom management. The collaboration meetings that the new teacher holds with their mentor are typically 12 hours in the first semester and 12 hours in the second semester. So if 24 hours for the entire school year, where they've met, there's been discussion about what that goal was for the meeting. Let's say classroom management, there's been discussion around classroom management, what that looks like. In those collaboration meetings, they also talk about what the observation needs to look like. Our mentors also observe our new teachers, not for evaluative purposes, it's more for learning and growth and development on the new teacher and mentors end, actually, for both. And so what happens there is the new teacher, the mentor actually observes the new teacher, gives them some pointers, some tips about classroom management. And then the new teacher takes that information, works on it in their classroom for a little bit, and then the mentor goes in, the new teacher goes and observes the mentor. Hopefully I said that right. The new teacher goes and observes the mentor. And they continue that cycle until the new teacher feels like, you know what, I got that down, let's work on something else. So if I've worked on classroom management, I feel like I've gotten that down, maybe I need to work on something else. And so that relationship continues throughout the school year. During that time, the mentor is logging those hours in KickUp. And so every time they meet with the new teacher, they're logging those hours. Every time they have an observation, whether it be the mentor observing the new teacher or the new teacher observing the mentor, they log that as well. And so we can see that information in KickUp as it's happening. They also have a goal setting meeting. And so we utilize T-tests. And so T-tests is our evaluation system. And so the mentor also helps the new teacher in determining what their goals need to be for T-tests, and they help them to determine that. And then they provide that information to their administrator if needed. So this is basically the cycle of activities that happens with our mentors.
Thanks for sharing all that context. So after Serena shared a little bit more this past year about what sort of data she was looking to gather, one thing that came up in our discussions was how much Serena was owning this process. And because she already wears a million hats, we were looking for ways to make what became a lot more efficient of a process in the past year even more efficient. And so this year, we're going to be trying out switching over to a mentorship coaching cycle in KickUp. And so I want to show you a little bit about what this looks like. I won't dig into all of the forms that she has living in here, but you can imagine your mentor would have a roster with the teacher that they're supporting. And then there are a couple other things that are sort of added with this new iteration of cycles. So you now have an activity log, and the mentor and teacher can be chatting back and forth about anything that's happening between the two of them. There's a cycle that I'll get into a little bit more in a second, where they can track all of those steps that Serena was just talking about that she was monitoring. And then a space for action items. And you can think of this as like a shared to-do list between mentor and mentee. And it's a really great place if there's something that you need your teacher to practice, or if you as a mentor need a working space to track all of your to-dos. It's a great place where you can check off any of the steps that you're completing. In the cycle itself, you'll notice that Serena, as she's overseeing this, she can see which of the steps are not yet complete. She can see the steps that have already been completed. And then she'll see which of the steps are steps that are assigned to the mentor and which of the steps are going to be assigned to the teacher. And then she'll have this overall progress bar where she'll be able to see how close are they to completing all of the requirements for that specific cycle. And she mentioned how these cycles might repeat over and over again, so she can quickly and easily toggle back and forth between different cycles. So I'm going to pause here. Serena, anything that you would share as you're planning for this transition and thinking about this transition next year?
I would say this is probably the most exciting thing in the world, because like Kendra said, I was basically owning the process. So I was keeping track for the mentor, how many hours that they had logged, and making sure I kept them updated, keeping track of the observations, and then, would update them with how many observations they had and how many more they needed. And so I'm excited about this piece because this will allow them to be able to do that. And so as a mentor, or even as a new teacher, I can see in the cycle where I'm at, as far as logging the information that I need to make sure I have logged, in supporting the new teacher. So I'm very excited about this piece. I feel like every year is going to get better and better. And I appreciate Kendra, because, we were talking about this, and then she was like, look, I have a solution for you already. And so I appreciate her always thinking about, how we can always make the process even more effective and streamline it even more. And I think once our mentors see this, they're going to be excited for this piece as well.
Yeah, I'm excited to take this a little bit off of your plate as much as possible. Awesome. So I want to jump in and give a little bit of a chance for folks who have questions to either drop them in the chat, or if not, we can share a little bit more about the program. Any initial questions that folks have, either about Serena's program or some of the pieces of data that she's tracking in KickUp? One question that I've seen sent: how did you establish the mentorship expectations for a mentorship cycle, and how did you get your mentors bought in?
Oh, that's a really good question. Okay, so we just sat down and looked at what the minimum requirements are as far as the state of Texas. State of Texas also gives a grant for mentorship as well. And we wanted to make sure that we were meeting those minimum requirements in the grant, even though we were not part of the grant. So we wanted our teachers to be able to have that same level of support, that any other teacher would be getting if they were a part of the mentorship grant that's TEA provides us. And so in that grant, it does require that mentors meet with their new teachers for 12 hours in the first semester and 12 hours in the second semester. Now, the observation piece is also a part of the grant as well, but we have actually stepped up the observation piece. For the grant, it's only 2, and we actually require 4, 2 in the first semester and 2 in the second semester. As far as our mentors, initially, when they first hear about, oh my goodness, all of this time that I'm going to have to spend with a new teacher, initially they do get overwhelmed, y'all. I'm not going to sugarcoat that piece. They do get overwhelmed with that. So the key is to provide our mentors with support. And so every single campus also has a new teacher liaison. So the new campus new teacher liaisons, they support our mentors, and they also support new teachers as well. Because remember, we only provide mentors to teachers who have 2 years or less, but there are teachers who have 3 or more years experience that also need support. And so our campus new teacher liaisons support them as well. And so our campus new teacher liaisons, they actually check in with our mentors, and they make sure, how are you doing? How are you doing with meeting with your new teachers? Do you need anything? Do you need me to help you with meeting with your new teacher? So that person is just a layer of support as well. Our mentors also know that they can reach out to me anytime. They literally have my cell phone number. And so they can reach out to me, they can text me, they can call me anytime they also need support. And then our content coordinators also help our mentors as well. And so as our content coordinator, they know who our mentors are. And they also know who the new teachers are for their specific content and grade levels. And so they help support in that way. Our mentors do get a stipend as well. It's probably not enough for all of the work that they do, but they do get a stipend that's paid to them at the end of the year, which is another reason why, it's very helpful to have the information in KickUp, because when the end of the year comes and I need to verify, yes, they do have their hours and yes, they have met their observation requirements, it's very easy to submit it to payroll and say, yes, they're good to go. You can pay out that stipend.
Awesome. Yeah. And the leaving your cell phone for all the mentors, the exact reason you need coaching cycles.
Yes.
One other thing off there.
For sure. But, it is sometimes a struggle for some of our mentors, especially if they're busy. Super busy. Some of our mentors are coaches as well. They have their own classroom. And so the key to that is making sure we provide them with support with the campus new teacher liaison.
I guess on that note of knowing that the mentors are busy, question from Aaron Jacobson. Do you see that the mentors are logging in KickUp in a timely manner, or do they wait and then log several items at a time?
That's a good question. So y'all, just like with anything else, it depends on the individual. You'll have people who will log every single time because they will have their little iPad up and they will log it right as soon as their session is over with their new teacher. There are some that'll wait a couple sessions and then they'll log. And then there are a couple where I have to email them and they're like, oh yeah, that's right, I have to log it. And so it just depends on the person and how proactive they are. We give them a date. So we provide them with a timeline during the school year that tells them, okay, you need to have this many hours logged by this time to help them stay on track. And for the most part, most do. Every now and then, we have to send a little email out and say, hey, don't forget, you have to log your hours in KickUp. The good thing about it being in KickUp though, y'all, is quick and easy. So when I do send that email to them, they typically have it in within hours that I send that email to them.
Awesome. Great to hear. I know we're coming up at the hour, so I just wanted to say thank you, Serena, so much for everything you've shared today, all of the insights. I'm really excited to see where your program goes next in the next year. I wanted to share a quick few takeaways from this that we'll be sharing out after this session. So there's an opportunity to sign up for KickUp coaching in this beta. And then coming up, there's an opportunity to join our KickUp community. Diane Sweeney is going to be doing an Ask Me Anything in our KickUp community on August 8th at 1 p.m. So we hope that you all will join either the beta or join the community using that link. And we look forward to seeing you at the next event. Thank you so much, Serena.
You're welcome. Thank you, guys.